You may not realize it, but love has the power to change the very structure of your brain. When love is real, it opens you up, it elevates your soul, it reshapes your mind in ways that promote growth, empathy, and resilience. But when love is fake, when it is manipulative, conditional, or selfish, it does the exact opposite. It rewires your brain in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, and before you know it, the person you are, or think you are, is no longer recognizable. Fake love is sneaky. It doesn't announce itself with neon signs. It doesn't come with a warning label. It often begins as something that seems flattering, exciting, even intoxicating. You feel seen, you feel chosen, and at first it feels like validation. But real love lifts you up. Fake love keeps you tethered to a version of yourself that isn't fully alive. Over time, the brain learns to accept this distorted version of reality as normal. You start to crave it. You start to depend on it. Dopamine spikes every time they compliment you or pull you close, but it's a counterfeit pleasure, a temporary high that masks a slow-growing emptiness. Every interaction with fake love triggers a response in your neural pathways. Your brain releases chemicals that feel good, but they are short-lived and deceptive. They mimic happiness, but they are built on insecurity, manipulation, or selfish need. The more your brain is exposed to these false signals, the more it rewires itself to seek that specific stimulation. Over time, your reward system becomes calibrated not to authentic joy, but to the approval, attention, and sometimes even the toxicity of the person you thought loved you. You begin to confuse control for care, manipulation for affection, and inconsistency for excitement. When you're trapped in fake love, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, judgment, and self-control, becomes compromised. This is why people stay in relationships that drain them emotionally, mentally, and sometimes physically. Your brain has been conditioned to prioritize the fleeting highs of validation over long-term well-being. You make choices that seem irrational to outsiders but feel unavoidable from the inside. You may even rationalize behavior that is clearly harmful because the part of your brain that used to guide you toward healthy, fulfilling connections has been hijacked by patterns of dependency and craving. Fake love also hijacks your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes emotions and threat responses. It keeps you in a constant state of alert, anticipating rejection, conflict, or abandonment. Every small disagreement, every delay in response, every sign of disinterest triggers fear, anxiety, or panic. Your brain interprets these signals as life-threatening because it has been trained to associate love with danger. Over time, your nervous system becomes chronically activated. Stress hormones like cortisol flood your body, affecting sleep, digestion, immune function, and your overall sense of calm. You become trapped in a cycle of stress and fleeting relief, constantly seeking approval and comfort from the very source that destabilizes you. The insidious thing about fake love is that it doesn't just affect your brain chemistry, it reshapes your perception of reality. You start to question your worth, your instincts, and your judgment. You begin to doubt your ability to recognize true love when it arrives. Your neural pathways reinforce the idea that love is painful, conditional, and unreliable. Your memories of past interactions are stored not as lessons, but as blueprints for what you believe love must look like. You may start repeating the same patterns with new people, unconsciously seeking the familiar mix of excitement and anxiety, craving the highs that were always tied to insecurity and fear. Over time, fake love erodes your capacity for empathy. When your brain is constantly preoccupied with your own survival in a manipulative relationship, it has less bandwidth for authentic connection. The mirror neurons, which allow us to feel and understand the emotions of others, become dulled. You may find yourself withdrawing from relationships that are healthy, avoiding intimacy that is genuine, or even responding with skepticism to kindness. Your brain begins to protect you from further harm by erecting emotional barriers, but these barriers also prevent you from experiencing real joy. Fake love also rewires the reward system in your brain to prioritize dependency over self-sufficiency. You may begin to measure your self-worth through the eyes of the person who is incapable of loving you fully. Your dopamine responses are no longer tied to achievements, growth, or authentic connection. They are tied to the approval and attention of someone who cannot provide the stability you need. Over time, you lose sight of your own desires, your own boundaries, and your own identity. You become a version of yourself that exists primarily to satisfy someone else. And the longer this goes on, the harder it is to remember who you were before the rewiring began. But awareness is the first step toward reclaiming your brain, your life, and your heart. Understanding that fake love is not just emotionally damaging, but neurologically altering gives you a new perspective on why it is so hard to let go. It's not laziness, weakness, or lack of moral fiber. It's your brain literally rewiring itself to crave something toxic. Once you recognize this, you can begin to consciously retrain your brain. You can start by establishing boundaries, seeking environments and relationships that provide consistency, safety, and respect, and cultivating practices that strengthen your prefrontal cortex, like mindfulness, meditation, and deliberate self-reflection. Healing from fake love is not about revenge or avoidance. It is about reclaiming the neural pathways that lead to authentic joy. Every choice you make to prioritize your well-being, to set boundaries, to engage with people who honor you strengthens the connections in your brain that promote resilience, self-respect, and emotional stability. Neuroplasticity works in your favor when you deliberately cultivate positive experiences. Your brain can unlearn the patterns of dependency and fear, replacing them with pathways that reward self-love, authenticity, and healthy attachment. You can also train your brain to recognize real love by paying attention to consistency, empathy, and respect. Real love is predictable, safe, and sustaining. It doesn't provoke panic or confusion. It supports your growth, your independence, and your sense of self. By consciously seeking these qualities, you begin to rewire your brain to crave what is good, reliable, and affirming, rather than the thrill of uncertainty or manipulation. The effects of fake love are cumulative, but so is the power of deliberate healing. Every moment you choose self-respect over approval, every time you step away from manipulation and toward authenticity, you are reshaping your brain. You are reclaiming the neural pathways that allow you to feel safe, to trust again, and to recognize the difference between toxic attachment and genuine connection. It's important to remember that breaking free from fake love is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of courage. It is a declaration to your own mind, heart, and spirit that you value truth over illusion, stability over chaos, and authenticity over pretense. By committing to this path, you not only heal yourself, you also model for others how real love looks and feels, creating a ripple effect that extends beyond your personal life into the lives of everyone around you. Understanding how fake love rewires your brain allows you to make choices with clarity instead of emotion. It allows you to see the patterns before you get trapped in them. It allows you to prioritize environments, relationships, and experiences that strengthen the parts of your brain responsible for judgment, empathy, and emotional resilience. And in doing so, you gradually reclaim the life you were meant to live, a life marked by authentic connection, inner peace, and the ability to love and be loved in a way that nourishes rather than depletes. We talk about fake love. It's easy to think of it simply as emotional dishonesty or manipulation, but it goes much deeper than that. Fake love is not just a social or emotional problem. It literally rewires your brain in ways that affect how you think, feel, and behave. The brain is incredibly adaptive. Every experience you have, every interaction, every compliment, every criticism is processed, stored, and interpreted through complex neural pathways. When the love you receive is fake, conditional, or manipulative, your brain interprets it as both reward and danger simultaneously. This creates a kind of cognitive dissonance that reshapes your neural architecture. It's as if your mind is being trained to crave something that is inherently harmful, and the consequences are subtle at first, but devastating over time. The first thing to understand is the role of neurotransmitters like dopamine. When someone gives you attention, approval, or affection, even if it is fake, your brain releases dopamine. This neurotransmitter is associated with pleasure and reward, so you feel a temporary high. You feel noticed, valued, maybe even loved. But here's the catch. This is not the dopamine of genuine connection, which comes from trust, safety, and authenticity. This is a dopamine that is tied to uncertainty, manipulation, and a constant fear of loss. Your brain quickly learns to chase this sensation, even though it doesn't actually provide real fulfillment. Every text message, every smile, every small sign of attention becomes a trigger for this reward system. Over time, the neural pathways strengthen around this pattern. Start craving the false highs more than true emotional stability. You become neurologically dependent on something that is fundamentally destabilizing. At the same time, fake love engages your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for processing fear, threat, and emotional intensity. When love is inconsistent or conditional, every minor rejection, delay, or moment of disinterest triggers a stress response. Your body releases cortisol, your heart rate increases, and your nervous system becomes hypervigilant. This is why people in toxic or fake relationships often feel emotionally exhausted or anxious, even when nothing has happened. Their brains are constantly interpreting subtle cues as threats. Your mind begins to associate love not with safety and care, but with unpredictability and danger. This creates a loop where your brain simultaneously craves attention and fears abandonment, making you more vulnerable to manipulation and emotional volatility. Fake love also impacts the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for judgment, decision-making, and impulse control. When this part of the brain is consistently exposed to manipulative patterns, its ability to guide you toward rational, healthy choices diminishes. You may find yourself tolerating behavior you would have previously rejected, excusing lies, ignoring red flags, and sacrificing your own needs to maintain the illusion of connection. Your brain has been conditioned to prioritize short-term relief over long-term well-being. You may rationalize staying in a harmful situation because the temporary highs feel worth it, even though they are eroding your emotional and neurological health. Memory and perception are also affected. Fake love changes how you remember past experiences and how you predict future ones. Your hippocampus, which is crucial for memory and learning, begins to store distorted signals as if they were normal. You remember the brief moments of pleasure and attention more vividly than the underlying harm, which reinforces the cycle. Your brain interprets these memories as evidence that fake love is acceptable or even desirable, further strengthening the pattern. Over time, your ability to distinguish authentic affection from manipulation becomes blurred. You may find yourself repeating the same types of relationships, unconsciously drawn to the combination of excitement and anxiety that your brain now interprets as normal. This rewiring doesn't just affect how you respond to others, it also affects your relationship with yourself. Fake love can suppress self-worth and erode confidence. When your brain is trained to measure your value through the attention of someone who is inconsistent or manipulative, you start doubting your own instincts and judgment. You may question whether you are deserving of real love, whether your feelings are valid, or whether your boundaries are unreasonable. The neural patterns associated with self-doubt, fear, and dependency become reinforced with every interaction, making it increasingly difficult to break free from these cycles. Interestingly, this process can also dull your capacity for joy and fulfillment outside the relationship. Activities that once brought you pleasure, spending time with friends, pursuing hobbies, achieving personal goals, may feel muted because your reward system has been hijacked. Your brain has been conditioned to respond most strongly to the highs and lows of fake love, creating a feedback loop where only the emotional volatility of the manipulative relationship feels intense or real. Everything else can feel flat, boring, or unworthy of attention. The neurological impact of fake love is cumulative. The longer you are exposed to it, the more entrenched the pathways become. Your brain adapts, but it adapts to the wrong stimuli. Emotional instability becomes normal. Anxiety, self-doubt, and dependency become default responses. Your perception of love, intimacy, and personal worth shifts in ways that make healthy connection seem unfamiliar or even uncomfortable. You may unconsciously seek out new relationships that replicate these patterns, reinforcing the cycle with each iteration. The first step in counteracting this rewiring is awareness. Recognizing that fake love is not just emotionally damaging, but neurologically altering, gives you a powerful lens through which to examine your relationships. Understanding the physiological and chemical responses that drive your behavior allows you to make conscious choices instead of reacting automatically to old patterns. Mindfulness, self-reflection, and deliberate boundary setting can help reestablish neural pathways that promote safety, stability, and authentic joy. By intentionally cultivating experiences of real, consistent, and nurturing love, your brain can gradually relearn what connection is supposed to feel like. The long-term effects of fake love go far beyond temporary emotional pain. They seep into every corner of your mental, emotional, and relational health. When your brain becomes conditioned to seek validation from someone who cannot consistently give it, you start to live in a state of constant uncertainty, and emotional fluctuation. Your mind is no longer free to experience peace because it is wired to anticipate rejection, manipulation, or withdrawal at every moment. This chronic instability reshapes your perception of reality. You may begin to believe that love is always painful, that trust is inherently risky, and that intimacy inevitably leads to disappointment. Over time, your expectations adjust downward, and you unconsciously settle for less than you deserve. The standard for what is acceptable shifts from genuine care and respect to mere attention or temporary affection, no matter how conditional or manipulative it might be. Your emotional intelligence begins to erode. Empathy, the ability to feel and understand another person's emotions, is dulled because your brain is preoccupied with self-preservation. Constant exposure to manipulative behavior forces your mind to erect emotional defenses. You may become hypervigilant, always analyzing the motives and intentions of others, or conversely, you may numb yourself to feelings entirely as a way to cope. These protective mechanisms serve a purpose. They shield you from further hurt, but they come at a cost. By dulling your emotional responses, your capacity for authentic connection diminishes. Healthy relationships which rely on trust, openness, and vulnerability feel foreign or uncomfortable. You may avoid intimacy altogether, or you may unknowingly recreate the same harmful patterns with new people, perpetuating the cycle. Decision-making also suffers under the influence of fake love. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning, judgment, and impulse control, is weakened when it is constantly reacting to emotional volatility. You may find yourself excusing unacceptable behavior, rationalizing mistreatment, or compromising your own values to maintain the illusion of connection. The lines between compromise and self-sacrifice blur. You may tolerate repeated slights, lies, or manipulations because the temporary high of approval, attention, or affection feels necessary to your survival. Over time, your brain learns to prioritize short-term emotional relief over long-term well-being, which reinforces dependency on toxic dynamics. Sleep, focus, and overall mental health are affected as well. Anxiety and stress caused by inconsistent or conditional love keep the nervous system in a heightened state of alert. Cortisol levels remain elevated, your thoughts race, and your ability to concentrate diminishes. This chronic stress not only affects cognitive performance, but also influences mood, leading to irritability, sadness, or emotional numbness. Even accomplishments or positive experiences may feel muted because the brain has become addicted to the intense highs and lows of fake love. Ordinary life feels less satisfying, and the brain begins to crave emotional turbulence over calm stability. Relationships beyond the one causing harm are also impacted. Friendships, family connections, and even professional interactions are filtered through the lens of mistrust and insecurity. You may struggle to accept kindness without suspicion, doubt the sincerity of compliments, or become emotionally distant from people who are genuinely supportive. Your capacity to recognize and appreciate authentic connection is impaired because your neural pathways are biased toward interpreting love through patterns of conditionality, manipulation, or unpredictability. Self-worth erodes gradually but profoundly. When your emotional and psychological needs are consistently unmet or exploited, your brain internalizes the idea that you are unworthy of consistent love. You may question your judgment, doubt your instincts, and blame yourself for dysfunction in the relationship. This internalized self-criticism becomes a blueprint for future interactions, subtly reinforcing patterns of dependence, insecurity, and compromise. Healing requires patience and intentionality. Recognizing the neurological and emotional consequences of fake love is the first step in reclaiming your brain. By creating boundaries, seeking consistent and nurturing relationships, and cultivating self-compassion, you gradually rewire neural pathways toward stability, trust, and authentic connection. Practices like mindfulness, journaling, meditation, and engaging in environments that provide emotional safety help retrain your brain to recognize and respond to real love, rather than the distorted patterns left behind by manipulation and conditional affection. Healing from the effects of fake love is not only possible, it is essential for reclaiming your life, your brain, and your sense of self. The first step is awareness, understanding that the patterns you have experienced are not a reflection of your worth or your ability to love, but rather the result of neurological conditioning shaped by inconsistent, manipulative, or conditional affection. When you recognize this, you begin to separate your identity from the toxic experiences that rewired your brain, and you gain the clarity needed to take deliberate action toward healing. Awareness transforms confusion into insight and empowers you to make choices that align with your authentic self, rather than the survival instincts your brain developed under stress. Rewiring the brain begins with establishing boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are bridges to self-respect and emotional freedom. By consciously defining what is acceptable and what is not, you signal to your brain that it is safe to expect consistency, care, and respect. Every boundary you enforce strengthens the neural circuits associated with self-worth and emotional resilience, while weakening those that were conditioned to tolerate manipulation. Boundaries teach the brain to prioritize your well-being over the temporary highs of approval-seeking or people-pleasing. And they provide a framework for recognizing and attracting relationships that reinforce authenticity rather than exploit vulnerability. Another critical element of healing is intentional engagement with positive experiences. The brain's neuroplasticity means that it can form new pathways whenever we expose it to healthy stimuli. Seeking relationships, activities, and environments that provide stability, support, and genuine connection retrains the reward system. Simple acts, sharing laughter with a trustworthy friend, pursuing a meaningful hobby, achieving a personal goal, create dopamine responses that are authentic, sustaining, and aligned with long-term well-being. These experiences serve as corrective training for the brain, gradually replacing the false associations created by fake love with real, healthy reinforcement. Self-compassion is equally important. Often, the aftermath of fake love leaves individuals harshly judging themselves, replaying perceived mistakes, or internalizing blame for the manipulation they endured. Self-compassion interrupts the cycle by rewiring the brain to treat mistakes, vulnerabilities, and past trauma with kindness rather than criticism. Every act of self-care, every moment of forgiveness toward yourself, reinforces neural pathways that support resilience, emotional regulation, and the ability to trust again. Compassion for oneself creates a foundation from which authentic relationships can grow, because the brain no longer relies solely on external validation for stability and pleasure. Mindfulness and deliberate reflection are tools that accelerate this process. By observing thoughts, emotions, and patterns without judgment, you create a space between stimulus and reaction. This space allows the prefrontal cortex to regain control, guiding decisions instead of reactive impulses. Journaling, meditation, and contemplative practices strengthen these executive functions, providing the brain with a sense of agency and stability that may have been eroded by prolonged exposure to fake love. Mindfulness teaches the brain that it is safe to slow down, to process experiences without panic, and to respond rather than merely react. Over time, these conscious efforts collectively reshape the brain's perception of love and connection. What was once associated with fear, dependency, and volatility becomes aligned with trust, security, and mutual respect. The neural circuits governing emotional regulation, reward, and empathy are strengthened, allowing you to experience genuine joy and connection without the anxiety and instability that once dominated your life. Your capacity to recognize healthy love increases, and you are naturally drawn to people, environments, and experiences that reflect authenticity. Reclaiming your brain from the influence of fake love is a process of empowerment. It involves consciously choosing self-respect, emotional safety, and authenticity over patterns of dependency and manipulation. Each deliberate choice, each moment of courage to prioritize your well-being signals to the brain that you value truth over illusion. Over time, these choices accumulate, retraining the mind, reshaping emotional responses, and creating a foundation for life experiences that nourish rather than deplete. The act of healing is, in essence, a reclamation of the self, a conscious rewiring that transforms past pain into a pathway toward resilience, inner strength, and the capacity to experience real, sustaining love. Understanding how fake love rewires your brain and seeing its long-term effects on your mind, heart, and relationships gives you the power to reclaim your life. The journey of healing is not about blaming yourself or others. It is about awareness, courage, and intentional action. Every boundary you set, every act of self-compass, every choice to prioritize authenticity over approval retrains your brain to recognize and respond to real love. You have the power to break free from patterns of dependency, insecurity, and manipulation, and to restore the parts of yourself that were dulled by false affection. Healing rewires your neural pathways toward resilience, emotional stability, and the ability to experience connection that nourishes rather than depletes by choosing self-respect, mindfulness, and intentional engagement with people and experiences that honor your worth. You strengthen the circuits in your brain that guide you toward joy, peace, and fulfillment. The power to transform your emotional and relational life lies in your hands, and every deliberate choice, no matter how small, contributes to a brain and heart that are free, strong, and capable of authentic love. Real love begins with you, and by cultivating it within yourself, you create the foundation for relationships and experiences that align with truth, consistency, and genuine care. You can rise above the damage fake love has caused, rebuild your sense of self, and open your life to connections that truly reflect respect, loyalty, and unconditional support, creating a life of balance, purpose, and happiness that you genuinely deserve.